Hey, good afternoon. Hello, everyone. Hello. Good afternoon, everybody.
Hi.
Hello. All right, let's just give everyone a chance. All right, let's see. Give everyone a few minutes. So, I had a student who was a doorman. I don't know if I ever mentioned that. And he loved it. He was an art student, and he said it's the only thing he'd like to do more than being a doorman was being an artist. I kind of understand that, actually. It's simple. Thank you all for being patient while the doorbell keeps ringing. It looks to be like there's still a number of people we're missing, but I'm going to move forward. Anyway, well, I hope everybody had a rewarding long weekend in some way. I would like to say a happy one, but I know a lot of you didn't get to go home. Some people generally do and didn't this year, and that might be a little sad. I know other people come from other continents and may not even celebrate. I'm not sure how that goes, but it's always good to have a long weekend, no matter how you get it. So I hope, on top of the drastic amount of work that I imagine you probably have, that there was a little bit of rest squeezed in. So I'm going to jump right to the handout because it's very grounding. Hopefully for you, but definitely for me. Make sure I don't go off on too many tangents. So I'm going to jump right in. I do have a few things to announce that I wouldn't want to forget. All right, let me just move some stuff around a bit. Give me a moment. All right, there are no assets today, so nothing to download. I do want to point this red look now business. And I really don't want anyone to miss this. And I have to wonder if the people who need it most are late, because that would be sad. Look, I want to say something about this. This is about failing grades and the idea of withdrawing from my class. So I just want to be quick and kind of blunt, right? Um, I graded everything I received up to by maybe an hour ago. So that means most of you have not seen your Project 3 grades, but they'll be up now. And I do want to say, if you're the type who's going to go to Blackboard and sneak in a look during class, uh, I trust you, but questions should be posed to me about grades via email. So always mention either your section or the day of the week when you pose a question to me so you could save me time looking that up if you ever have a question about a grade. But I do want to say a few things about Project 3 grades and grades in general and that withdrawal option as far as I know. First off, the Project 3 grades were phenomenally high. I didn't actually take a mathematical average, but I would guess that the average was around 90 or higher. So I want to say something about that. That basically means if you got 100, you completely rocked. If you got 96, 97, 96 or higher, means you were teetering on 100. It just, there were other people who did even more of a knockout job. I always want to say something about that odd criteria. In the arts, you're always going to be stacked against other artists. It's not the same as taking a math quiz, and everyone can get 100. It's not going to happen really in an art class, really. So if there are 5 or 6 people that are just doing stunning, stunning work, they establish what 100 is. So I got to say, though, there were a number of hundreds. There were a number of grades, say over 95. There was the majority of grades were over 90, which just means you guys rocked completely. I want to say something if you got a low grade, even a failing grade, you got something under 65. Don't feel shattered by it. If you did get under, frankly, under 65, certainly, but even under an 80, which is usually okay, but we're in an art school, you know. So I just want to be very blunt about a few things. One, if you get a low grade and you know the fault was yours, right? Just figure out what that was. Did life get in your way and then the fault really wasn't yours? I mean, like you got sick, you had a breakdown, which is legitimate, or you had to relocate, you lost your lease, stuff like that. Someone in your family got too sick, it took your attention, their health took your attention. All those things mean you got to cut yourself some slack emotionally, but you just have to be prepared, though, that in the real world of commerce driven by art, or art driven by commerce, people are going to be sympathetic, but they're not going to change assessment because that's what we do. We have to deal with our own lives while producing. I'm certainly sympathetic if anyone got a low grade for reasons like that, right? It means you probably heard from me in an email and we may be negotiating some opportunity for you. On the other hand, if you got a low grade, you tried really hard, you just like, just not that good at the skills I needed for project 3. Well, that's also good to know. It means either you're going to need more time or more work, or you're going to steer your art away from that skill set. They're both completely viable ways to treat it. You get a low grade, you gave it your all, had nothing to do with fate. Just you got a low grade. It basically means either you got to find time to work much harder on that skill set on your own because time has passed here, or it's a different art form waiting for you, which is completely legitimate. I mean, the guy who made up Charlie Brown, and Peanuts, Snoopy, the rest of it, are you sure he would have passed my class? I'm not so sure. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. So again, you just have to assess for yourself. In life, it's rare that you could get hundreds on everything, even though I'll admit some of you do, which is also, wonderful. So let me just get back then. If you're average, now look, guys, when you get around to it, if you have not really later today, tomorrow, check your grades out. Check the column called weighted average. Weighted average is telling you pretty much what you would get if the class stopped today. There's one more project coming. But if you have 100 weighted average, you're just rocking. You got a 90 weighted average, you're actually rocking, you get 70, 80, that's not competitive in New York City. Just not, especially if the class average is around a 90, basically means you got to figure it out. Do you need more time? Do you need more work? Do you need an escape hatch? I can't really tell you. It's an individual thing. So I don't want to say too much about it because the grades were so high. There's only a couple people. If your grade is under 65, you should be concerned, very concerned. Really, frankly, under 75. But it just means it's likely the person's not going to pass the class. They're going to have to take it again. So I want to say something about the most extreme situation. I'm going to make it really quick. You got 60, you're still in the game. You want to try to pass the class. You're just going to have to do much better on the last project. You got under a 50, I just don't see how that person could pass. But what's even more importantly, you shouldn't want to pass. You didn't learn important skills. Your grades wouldn't be that low if you had learned those skills. So it means as an artist, you don't want to move forward without getting the skills from an important class like this one. So you might want to withdraw. I'm just going to say something fast because I'm out of my domain right now. I'm not a grade advisor and I can't tell you what to do. And I'm only bringing it up because I discovered that the deadline for withdrawal is today. I thought it was all semester because of COVID, but I got a letter that that's not so. So that's today. So if your grade is too low to turn around, and by the way, appealing to me isn't going to do it, right? Because I don't have that much power. I still have to grade according to the work I get. So if it looks out of reach, you must read this. Now, you might have read it already if you're in that situation because the school's registrar sent you the same text. I created a PDF out of it and I made it a link, just double checking that it works, and it does, just to make it easier for anyone who's alarmed to find it. You would have to take action today. Folks, I don't know off the top of my head if anyone in the room right now is in that situation because I don't have a case-by-case scenario memorized. So you should check Blackboard, see if it's you. If the situation's dire, better to take a withdrawal than it is to take a failing grade, which will affect your average for the rest of your career. Withdrawals don't do that. They don't affect the average. You know, you still pay for the class. That sucks, right? But it doesn't affect your average. So, all right, I'm going to stop. Guys, if any of you have questions for me about this, I have to apologize. I don't know anything. I'm a teacher. I don't work in administration. So you'd have to read the letter that I linked.
Can I say something on that?
Yeah.
Like what you just said? This is actually my second semester. I was a fine arts student before this.
Oh, okay.
I was taking the classes and they just weren't for me. So like I had to withdraw from a bunch of them and all that. So like it seems dire, like when your teacher is talking about withdrawing and you're not going to pass the class, but actually it's probably the best thing that you could do in this situation if it feels right.
Micah, thank you so much for kicking in there. Really, that's wisdom. That's true wisdom if I ever heard it. Look, guys, listen. I got to tell you something. I got to make it short because we have cool stuff to do today. But I just want to say, your tour guide of this show left school after about one semester in an utter panic. I went to the School of Visual Arts, and when I went there, it was deadly. It really was. And the teachers were unfriendly, and the whole situation was just way out of reach for me. And I left. I was already publishing a little bit, so I thought I was so good. I wasn't. And I went out and discovered that I wasn't. And then I went out and I thought any kind of job I could find. I was a boulder picker in the desert. The boulder picking jobs got me to go back to art school. I just had to rethink what I was after. And just like Mecca, I changed my major. And that major got me closer. You know, I wound up having to take a leave and I came back and then eventually found my multimedia way to you guys. And I consider myself rather successful in my eyes. I get to be creative every day, and that's success. So again, if any of you had a bad semester, take that wisdom you just heard, rethink, see if withdrawal is the best way to do it. You know, listen, I have to say, well, I don't have you guys memorized. There's only one or two people with low grades at all, and I don't remember if anybody was failing. I do believe that there was maybe one or two. So if you would know by now that you were in danger, to be blunt. But again, thanks, Micah. I'm glad you shared that, really. Okay, let me get back here, back inside. So again, yes, the instructions for withdrawal are here. I'm going to try to check my email more often because if anyone does choose to withdraw, even this is spelt wrong, but it worked, this link, it's my fault. They'll probably need me to back you on it, and I'll, of course, do that. All right, let's get on to the next thing. I just want to point out how little is left to this semester. We've got 3 classes left, right? So if I did okay late work, because some people had extenuating circumstances, you know, wild ones. So I did okay in some cases late work. Just be clear, this is the whole window here. Right. By the way, if you're late for project 2, I shut that door. You know, really, that's way too. I'm just talking about the last project. So anyway, here are the dates. All right. Tutoring still available as far as I know. The YouTube playlist is up to date as far as I know. I should be the authority. Yes, I'm pretty sure it's up to date. Revisions are still accepted whenever you give me work on time. I'm open to revisions. Just be sure that they're named correctly. Go into our folder, then find the revisions folder and put your rename work in there. All revisions that I received up to an hour ago have been graded, as well as late work. So I'm completely up to date. All right. Before I move on to the new project, you know, where we're at right now, does anybody have any questions about late work or, you know, anything that I could conceivably answer? No? So some of you guys heard back from me today from emails that were a few days old. So, you know, check later if you've been waiting to hear from me. All right, let me move forward then. So, you know, I want to tell you something about this last project, and I'd like you all to really, really hear me out on this. You guys are really ready, seriously ready for more imaginative projects. You know, the semester's been a little restrictive to make sure skills. It's all about skills, certain level of thinking, not a hell of a lot of imagination. Design always is, right? But not in a big way like this last project. The key word in the project is reimagined. Like someone sent me a very nice graphic design poster for a city. You know, it had a famous person, a landmark, was nicely laid out, but it was a postcard for a city. That's not this project. You know, this project is reimagined cities. So who do you admire that has a great imagination in the arts? You know, I don't think you usually turn to, say, Michelangelo for imagination, even though he was very imaginative, you know. Well, that's a bad example. Yeah, I'm trying to think of someone we all know. But, you know, Dali, I think most of you guys know Salvador Dali. Give me a second here. I want to show you guys something quickly. You know, he's a good choice. I think most of you guys know Salvador Dali, but I just want to say something about Dali and this particular project. I'm just picking one that I think you might have seen before. This guy right here. That's crazy, right? It's called Persistence of Memory. And he's got melting watches, and just about everyone in the arts knows this particular painting. Now, what would he do if someone said, hey, Salvador, I want you to reimagine Rome. I don't want the Rome we all know, and want a Rome of yours. Or said, reimagine Berlin, you know, one of the most famous cities in the world, in Germany, you know, or any place in any country in the world. Reimagine it. So what he would probably do is try to find what's known about that place and spin it. You know, for example, Rome, right, is the heart of the Catholic world. And if you're ever lucky enough to go there, there's art everywhere. There's sculptures everywhere. But how would I reimagine it? Would I do something to those sculptures so they were different? Would they all be holding their cell phones? You know, these Renaissance, it would be funny, right? Because you know the tourists are all doing that. That would go somewhere. You know, or because it's religion, and religion is so surreal. I mean, really, people walking on water, and people putting certain amount of oil in a lamp, and it stays lit for days longer, and it's like very surreal. All those miracles, you know, or what about your city can be taken out to an imaginative place? You know, it's got to include your imagination, right? So even if it's well done, that's good. But if it's well done without the imagination, it's not this project. So, you know, we have a lot of time. I'm not saying this in a finger wagging type of way. I'm saying it in a kind of promoted way, because I got to tell you bluntly, it's not ever been the best project from my class. It's the most fun. And almost every semester, I'm like, yeah, there were some good ones. But I feel a little bit like my students are kidnapped people. You know, they get out, they don't know what to do with freedom. You know?
I have a quick question.
Yeah, please.
So, since I mean, I know I was picking like a slightly smaller city, but some cities we all chose might be lesser known. Will we be allowed to tell you why we picked the particular city when we're going through our sketches?
Well, today I'm not going to go through them with you, but you could definitely send me an email. Next week, I think I might break the rules and actually look at the first digital draft. Uh, you know, because the project is that important to the semester. It's like I'm cheap about like when we look at work together, because I'm trying to save time for techniques that we have to cover before you leave my room.
Yeah.
But I have to tell you, we've been doing great with the techniques. So the list of what I have left is shorter than I took a peek today just to remind myself. It's a little bit smaller than I expected. So you're likely to get more contact from me on this
Okay.
project.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, and okay. So let me just think, is there anything more I want to tell you about this? You know, have fun with it, really. I know everyone's tired. Fun might be something that we all forgot about, but you've got more skill than you had just a couple months ago. I mean, frankly, you know, you're all kind of like capable of these stunning things. But really, the reason you started making art, why did you start making it? Do you remember? You know what I mean? And it had something to do with magic, and it had something to do with imagination, or you would never have gone this far. So I want you to bring that back. All right, let me go ahead and get that handout out again. So what we're going to do now, and you know, I don't really know how this is going to go, because I peeked. I'm going to peek again. Give me 1 second here. Let me just get a look at something. Just want to see what's in there. Oh, that's good. There's a fair amount in there. Great. So, what we're about to do is we're going to do some breakout rooms where you could talk amongst yourselves. And by the way, it's perfectly okay to, in a breakout room, this is killing me. I hate this project. What's up with that crazy teacher? But, the main goal, of course, is to support each other. Like if you like what someone did visually, but you're not getting the reimagination part, please let them know. Just say, wow, I love your style or whatever you want to say. But can you make it more imaginative? Can you take it to a magical place where, contribute to each other? That's the main goal, right? Where you're free and not worried about what you might say something wrong. There's only 4 or 5 of you in a room. So we're going to be doing that in a couple minutes. I want to say something techie though about this. And because of COVID and Zoom, I've had to teach this a little differently. Not very, just a little. In the classroom, you'd all just open it up on your monitors and I corral everybody into rows and you just look at a row, right? By the way, that's harder than it sounds. No one wants to get up in the classroom. Well, here you don't even have to get up. But about what you put in Google Drive, I want to tell you the dual purpose. But first, you could have dropped JPEGs in a folder like I asked, but I really don't care how you got those sketches in there. Some clever people made one big PDF with 4 or 5 pages of sketches or whatever, or 2 or 3, and that's fine. I don't really care how you got the sketches in the Google Drive, as long as they're there and they're neat so I can peek at them. Now, when we go into the breakout rooms, though, show them however you want, other than turning your computer around and thinking people are going to see that, because they're not, right? So you could open it up any way you want. And now remember, I did tell everybody you had to photograph them or scan them, right? Because of this. So look, I want to say a last thing or two. I know I'm taking a long way around, but so a lot of work in the Google Drive. Excellent. Now, if you're a little bit behind, don't, right? We've got a few weeks left to the class. You've got enough time to do a good job with this. I'm not endorsing being late for sketches. I'm definitely not endorsing it, but I'm not clobbering you either. I know how life gets, especially at this point in the semester. Just do your best. Get back on that wave, right? All right, let's take a look at the handout before I actually get the breakout room started. Look, we've done this, I believe, twice before, but I could be wrong, so I just want to say it again. You're going to be prepared to screen share, right? So you're going to click that green share button at the bottom, that screen share. And since your sketches are probably not in Illustrator, don't go choosing Illustrator at your next option. After you click share screen, it asks you, like, what do you want to share? So you should choose desktop or screen. This way you could show anybody anything you have however you want, JPEGs or however you did it. At the end, please click end share so the next person can go. Here's the things you want to talk to each other about, just some talking points. Is the image compelling? What or where is it? If I don't know where it is, you know what I mean, there's an issue, right? If it isn't compelling, the other questions don't matter. Is it imaginative, insightful? So I want to just point out, we're not going to agree on what imaginative is. Even when I showed you 8 projects last week, I had complaints about a few. I don't know if you remember the one that was in supposed to be Las Vegas, but it was like space aliens in Vegas. And I gave them an A. It was very professional, truly compelling, clever, just slightly misguided. How can you talk about Vegas without one gambling machine, for one? And why did it look more like the neighboring town of Roswell? He could have made it all work, and he didn't think it through. So you want to help each other think it through a bit. Look, that guy got an A, and I think he deserved it, but not every teacher would. You know what I'm saying? So here we go. All right, so it goes. I just had one more person get in just in time. Great. All right, so look, folks, I'm going to give you about 20 minutes. Try to do what you can with it. Make sure everybody gets a turn to be seen. Okay. Get your work ready. And I am going to set up those breakout rooms. So just give me a second. Get that off the ground. And here we go. I'll see you in about 20 minutes. You get a notice from me before then, though. Hey, Francesca, you there? I see you're not assigned to a room. I'm going to take care of that right now. There you go. All right, good. Wow. Oh, God. Jesus Christ. Okay. I'm now staring at the screen and people on YouTube are saying, wow, is this boring? I should learn how to play jokes for moments like these, or just pause the recording. 1 minute away. Why not? There we go. Thank you. Your work will always be better, actually, if you have preliminary steps, because you have a chance to reject things that were half-baked and approach things that are richer, right? I want to say I speed read the sketches, which I mentioned to some of you. I literally looked at every one that's in the Google Drive, but like in seconds. And I don't really like when people do that to another artist's work. It was just to get an impressionistic feeling. And some of you guys are so ready for this project that it's just like wildly imaginative sketches with a lot of, frankly, flair, even in the drawings. Some of you are very comfortable thinking on paper, and that's a big advantage. As I'm admitting, it took me longer to get to that stage, and some of you got there earlier, where you could think on paper, as I keep on repeating.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please, Rachel.
So with the last project, you like let a couple of us show our work and like got your feedback from the get-go. Is that okay with you after class today if you have time?
It is, yes. Let's. I think I may be able to end a little early to actually help that happen, since I know some people have classes after. But yeah, Rachel, and if I do that, you're going first, okay?
Okay, thank you. Thank
Welcome.
you.
And listen, folks, I realize how difficult it is to work on stuff when you're not getting enough feedback from the teacher. And I think you also see the reality of it. This is how every art school everywhere works, unless you're in a class of 10 people, which just does not happen in this particular country, really. That's not true, actually. Rarely happens, right? So this is part of it. And really, frankly, even in the professional world, you're not going to get as much feedback as you want, you know? So I am going to try to give more feedback, though, in the weeks remaining. And I have a luxury because we're closing in on the list of techniques that I want to share. So today I'm going to take a big bite out of that. Friendly techniques that I think a lot of you are going to want to use on this project or some other project. They're all optional at this stage, right? So I want to move into that. But I do want to say, though, the drawings are very encouraging. A lot of them had more imagination than I thought. There were a couple that looked really good, but there was not much imagination yet. There were a couple where the drawing was so little, it was like no effort to communicate to anyone. It was just extreme shorthand. And at least one person I overheard talking to their group in the breakout room, and I loved the idea. But remember, sketches are really there for you to talk about. So they need typically to go just to that level where you could point and talk. Listen, before I jump into techniques, does anybody have any kind of general question about this project? Something that may have risen up during the breakout room or?
I have a question.
Yeah, Christina.
My concept kind of combined like two of my favorite landscapes. I kind of took Bolivia and Budapest.
Wow.
And then someone in my group suggested that like for naming it, maybe I combine the names together. Like I'm not really quite sure where I want to go with this yet, but what is your feedback how to approach those two things, putting those?
I have to say, I'm very attracted to the idea of you merging two places. I'll admit it's a little off, but Nebraska was one that was in the sample I showed you where this person combined New York City and Nebraska, and it was sort of brilliant. So if you want to do that, I'm going to back you on it. I do want to say, though, what's curious is there's a handful of cities we all know a little about. I say San Francisco, we all got a good guess what's going to look. I say Paris. I say Bolivia, by the way, is a country, so you'd have to be a little more specific. I have a friend from Bolivia, so I know a little bit, and I know the salt mines are pretty wild. The salt deserts are pretty wild. Budapest, I don't know much more. So the challenge would be, how would you, let us in on it, since most of us have been to neither of those two places. But I do like the idea. So I would support you on it, but that, listen, I don't mind. I hope she doesn't mind. Somebody in here was working with these surfers. Where are you? The surfer, the one with the surfers. There you are, Ashton. So Ashton, I'm going to mention what we were talking about. So, she did these surfer. One of them's in like a hazmat suit. He's like doesn't want to get COVID even while he's surfing. It was really funny and interesting and kind of playful. And the people in her group had said, but like, I didn't know that this was Oahu in Hawaii or and you know, it was great advice. And they immediately came up with solutions for it. And she's heading in the right direction. So that's sort of the criteria here. We definitely want magic. We definitely want some imagination involved. We want to give people some idea where they are, if at all possible. And if it is a rare place, just help us get into it with you. You know, if it's a place that you can't reference with just the Eiffel Tower or something that easy, you know, just see what you can do. I'm pretty open-minded about it.
Okay, so like find the distinctive elements.
Absolutely. And that's why I made such a big deal last time I saw you guys about research. Like, you know, and this is part of life, because you might get an assignment like this if any of you become illustrators about a place you've never been. There's this little tiny island. You could walk around it in 2 hours. It's called Gili Meno. It's in Indonesia. And I don't know anybody else other than some family who's been there. And if I wanted to do a piece about it, I'd have to figure out a way to make you want to learn about Gili Meno, you know, which is just a speck of dust in the middle of the Pacific that I happen to love. So again, it's a challenge, but again, it would take some research to see what's in the real place so that I could take it to the imaginary place. All right, I want to share screen with you. And let me just double check that I'm not missing anything in my chats, and I'm not. That's okay then. I want to share my screen, and we have some cool, simple stuff to do today, but cool stuff. So I want to show you, the first thing that's been on my mind is this class has not given line proper attention. You know, and what I mean by that is we were treating line as just a way to organize shapes because you were going to fill them with color later. And that's valid. That's very valid. But also there's just line drawing. And there's so much great line drawing, and some of you guys are killer at it. I could see just from the sketches. And if you wanted to use that skill set in Illustrator, you'd want to learn more about what can I do with my lines. Let me add, that doesn't mean you can't use color on your lines or in fills anyway, but we do want to give lines some attention. So I want to show you guys something. There are 3 tools that come to mind. 2 prominent and 1 less prominent. There's the stroke palette, and we've been using it, but not enough. And I want to show you some cool stuff in it. There's also this little palette called the control menu. I'm going to show you in a minute or two. This is sort of second shelf, but it can help with line. And lastly, are brushes, all about brushes, right? And the brushes palette itself, which comes with amazing libraries of brushes you can use. So the 2 things I want to focus on to simplify is the stroke palette and the brush palette to get us started. Could everybody join me in Illustrator? You could open up any size page right now. So any size is going to be fine. I'm going to go with the letter size standard. Now, first thing I'd like for you to draw a leaf. Now what I need is a curvy leaf. So nothing too angular. You know, not like the Canadian flag, whatever that is, the oak leaf, right? And if you'd like a little bit of help with it, I'm going to do it with the pen tool, and you might want to do a little pen tool with me, right? I need it to be a closed shape. That's important. I'm getting the pen tool. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to press and drag. Let me show you once what I want, and then I'm going to just explain it a little bit. So I'm going to go with a shape like this. Now, ours don't have to be the same, but this is roughly the kind of leaf that I'm going to go over, you know, use as an excuse to bring the pencil back into the mix. So I want a smooth shape. Mine does look a little like a candle flame, but that's all right. All right, pen tool. One could click the white arrow first if you remember all the good things that produces, but right now I'm just going to go with the pen tool. One thing I would say is you probably want to turn your fill off almost any time you use the pen tool. So I'm going to bring the fill in front and click color of none. But even if you skip those steps, I'm talking about the plain old pen. I'm going to press and drag. I'm starting on the back end of the leaf, not the point. And this is saying that I want the first curve to go up. And I'm going to take it all the way out to my point, and I'm going to press and drag again. So I'm watching that curve to see if it's a shape I like. So again, I'm going a little quickly. Press and drag up, move somewhere, press and drag down. But at this point, I need to change directions, and that's always been the issue, right? I want a point, I don't want a lump. So I'm going to hold down the Option key, or Alt if I was on Windows, and I'm going to say, I'm going to press out of the anchor and say, go this way. And I'm going to let go of Option or Alt. So you can see it knows that I changed directions. I'm going to come about here, pull it. I'm focusing on the end of the leaf. And now I'm going to cap the leaf off with a big round end. So I'm going to hold down Option to help me close this shape. Oops. Hang on, I'm clicking the wrong key. There we go. I just want to remind you, at that stage, if you click the white arrow, you could use the command trick to move stuff. But if you didn't, you could just get the white arrow and perfect it. Click on curves to see what handles they use. If you want to move any anchors, just click and move them. It's all about the white arrow. Look, I only have a few weeks left, so I'm feeling a little greedy. I do want to mention one quick thing. I also pushed the pencil tool on people. And it is an easier tool, but it isn't a precision tool. But it's not all about precision anyway. So if I wanted to draw something similar, I got the black arrow now. I'm just going to move this over. I could get the pencil tool, which is hiding here, right? Using the letter N. But I'm going to double click it to make sure that I got smoothing on. And I like it about here. But then all I'm going to do is this. I'm just going to simply draw the way I want to draw. Let it smooth for me. Just be very careful that I'm getting what I want out of it. And I could still use the white arrow if I wanted. So I'm okay with either approach. All right, if you got a leaf for me, I'm going to need at least 4. So you might want to size it down with your black arrow and then make some copies for me. I'm using the black arrow, and I'm also holding down Option every time I want to drag a copy. Now, my main point is I wanted curves, because some brushes only show their beauty when they take a turn, you know, when they go around a curve. Think about graffiti or calligraphy, how lines change the thickness and the line weight. And that's the first thing I want to focus on. Variable line weight. Variable means not the same. It varies. It changes. All right. I need for you to get the stroke palette out. So the stroke palette, like all the palettes, lives under the window menu. Window menu, stroke. We've used it, but not for the cool stuff. So that's window menu, stroke. I want to show you something though. Right next to the word stroke is a double arrow, which folds it up for when your screen is crowded. But I want to make sure that you see it opens in several sizes, because the feature I want is at the bottom. So if yours is only halfway open, you're not going to see the part I want. Profile. All right. I'd like you to choose one of your leaves. I'd like you to raise the weight on the stroke palette to at least 3. And then I want you to come to the very bottom. Now these are literally variable width profiles. So I'd like you to click on that menu and choose the next one down. If you'd like to see what that looks like with a thicker line weight, raise your line weight. Right now I'm way up at there at around 12. So I do want to say some of these widths will look great, pretty small, 2 or 3 points. Others look great, really bold and big. So you have to experiment a little. All right. I would like you though to try out the other profiles on that leaf. This one's got, it narrows twice, right? And gets thick twice. So this is a little more satisfying for my leaf. And I'm at 12 points. It can make it very subtle by bringing that down. And it looks very much, you know, by the way, I want to say something to you about this. If you were my age, you might have been trained to do this with a brush. You know, especially cartoonists. Frankly, I was the last wave of this. So it was mostly people older than me. All the cartoonists, they used brushes. You know, they dip it in and you wanted your brush to be really pointy so you can make thin lines. And if you pressed, it would get thicker. Right now, we're using the computer to do it. I would like to add something about drawing tablets. This is one of the best parts of using a drawing tablet, but you would have to reteach yourself some stuff when you get one, right? The tablets all act differently, so I don't have any universal advice, but YouTube covers them at great length, and always include Adobe Illustrator in your quotes. If you want to know how to use your tablet with any program like Adobe Illustrator, put it in quotes so you don't get Photoshop advice, right? You know, they're all different, right? All right, in any case, I hope you like the variable width profile. There's not a lot to know about them. They're all different. Some of them are pretty odd, like this one, right, which starts flat. And that's probably mostly for things coming off the edge of something where, hang on a second there. Get out of there. I shouldn't have done that. I'll come back to that subject. But in any case, here are your different profile shapes. I want to draw your attention to a small feature that, you know, seems to bail me out when there's weird emergencies. It's not a favorite tool when it comes to brushes, but I want you to see it. If you look on the top of my screen, there's this bar here. This is called the control bar. And the interesting thing about the control bar is it changes depending on what you're doing. So if you selected your drawing, the control bar might look like this. And you'll notice up top, it has some of the same features. Here's the stroke weight. This here is variable width. So you might say to yourself, why do I need it? You know, really, why do I need it? Well, there's a couple reasons. One, most of us leave it out. So it's there. You're in a hurry, you don't want to reach for the stroke palette, you might find what you need way up top. But it also has this other feature that I want to point out that isn't even on the stroke palette. This here is variable width. Okay, that we got. But what's this? This is a miniature brushes palette. Now we're going to explore this with the real brushes palette and then come back to take a look at the control bar. All right, so I'm going to just click this to put it away. All right, so bear with me. Stroke palette needs to be out. The control bar should be out. If yours is, you know, it's almost always out by default. But if you ever lose it, it is under the window menu. You know, these up top are all the usuals, right? Like your toolbar, for example. But this is the control bar. I just put it away. I'm going to open it up again. All right. The cool thing I'm pointing out, though, is that width profile feature. I want to show you the brushes palette next. Could everybody join me? Go to the window menu. It's in alphabetical order once you know, in the main section anyway. Let's go down to brushes. I want to say a little bit about the brush palette, and I'd like you to really hear me out in a little bit of detail. I want to confess that I use the brushes palette just as a starting point. It opens up a bunch of libraries that I use a lot. The brushes palette itself, you might like more than me. There are ways to edit brushes there. There's a way to store your brushes there. It does lots of cool things. But today I want to focus on the brush opportunities that it opens. And let's start right away. If you look at the bottom left corner, there's a library icon. And I want to say something quickly about that. Other palettes have the same library icon. So if you're on the brushes palette, well, the brush libraries, different kinds of brush. If you're on the swatches palette, it's different kinds of swatch, different colors. So right now, I just want to talk to you about the brush libraries. Could you come down here? You know, actually, first, could you use your black arrow and select a different leaf? And then go to the bottom of the brush palette. At the bottom left, it opens the libraries, but I want you specifically to go to the ones called artistic. Now bear with me. There is one before it called arrows, but how often are you going to draw with arrows? You know, I've been doing this for over 20 years. I think I've used it twice. This is really useful though. Artistic. Now I want to come back to calligraphic, so let's skip it. I have a reason why I want to skip it. Can you go right to chalk charcoal? Now this is pretty interesting. I'd like you to try any one that you want. And if you'd like to see it at a larger stroke size, use your stroke palette. Chalk charcoal. I'll bet a bunch of you could click a few of those while I'm talking to you. I bet a lot of you have drawn with chalk or charcoal or both. I love it. And it's super messy. And this is never going to compete with real chalk or real charcoal, but it does a good job at imitating the line. You know, that it really does. Now, the weird thing is when you click through the different kinds, you're actually adding brushes to the brush palette. This brush palette was really small just before, but every one I just tried got added. So I've been doing some thinking about that weird detail. I think the idea is you're going to pick 2 or 3 that you really want for this one project. And then you can just put away the other palettes, just leave the brushes palette out. So it's less of a mess. On the other hand, if you're like me and you're super greedy, I'll typically click 40 or 50 of these before I make up my mind. So my brushes palette gets really cluttered. No big deal, right? Now I want to mention a couple things about it though. When you have a library open, it also gets the same library button, so you could skip ahead to a different library or use these arrows. Now I love these arrows, so I really want you to notice them. They're not on the stroke palette. They're not on the brushes palette. These 2 arrows are only on the libraries. So what I'd like you to do is click the right side arrow once to get to the next library. This is a Spatter Library, so you're not likely to get a lot of use out of it unless you're, drawing murder scenes. That's my unfortunate sense of humor. But I'm going to leave there, and I want to click the next arrow because okay, these are cool. Maybe at the bottom there's some better ones. Artistic ink. Let's see, the last one was chalk charcoal. The one that follows starts with spatters, is really called artistic ink. And it's pretty cool. Got a wet vibe on a lot of them. I want to throw in some things. All of these brushes take experimentation. They all have quirks. Like some won't let you change their color. Most of them will, but some won't. Some are transparent by default. Some are not. So they're all going to take play to see how cooperative they are. I want to spin through to the next one. I'm on artistic ink. Is the third one over, artistic paintbrush, right? So it doesn't look like charcoal. It looks like globby paint. And some of them are pretty great. And I don't want to leave out the fact you could give them fills if you want. And as I said, most of them will let you change the stroke color.
Professor,
Yes.
can you give the fill a similar texture so like the outside looks like it's a paintbrush, but the fill doesn't at the moment?
That's a really good question. You would have to use effects, the texture steps that we explored in the past.
Okay.
Yeah, they don't. It's interesting. I have to say though, some people brush like this, to get that effect, and then draw the contour as a mask. So we're going to do some masks later today. I'm a little afraid of that idea because it would be a lot of anchor points, a big, messy approach, but it could be beautiful. Imagine a very vaporous cloud. So you brushed all over the place with this stuff, but then you'd want the shape. So how would we get it to fit in a shape? So a mask is one option. Like I said, I'm a little hesitant about that advice. I would sooner go to effects. I'm going to stick my neck out for a minute. And I'm going to go down to a feature that we used called the texturizer. I just want to make sure the fill's in front. I'm not even sure that matters, but I'm going to do it just to be extra careful. So I could do stuff like that, you know, but you were saying you wanted a different on the stroke and the fill. So the only way to do that, listen, everybody, if you're afraid of things getting complicated, do this right now. Because I'm afraid about what I'm about to show you. This is something I avoid in my own work, and I'm having the nerve to actually show you. So I wish me luck. I need the appearance palette for this. You know, I've mentioned this palette a bunch of times because I like that it tells me what I'm using on the whole image. But I'm kind of wondering whether it would let me apply an effect just to a fill. You know, because here's the effects. But how would I get it just on a fill? That I'm really not sure. I'm on fill here. I'm going to try it. Don't think that's going to work, but I'm going to just see it through. So here is the texturizer. Can I just drag it up and make it work just on the fill? Looks like that's a no. So I just want to say, Juliana, it's a great question. It's something I'm going to keep my eye on now that you bring it up. You know, because my own feeling is, I want to throw something at you. I had this art director, and he was scary, and he was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize, so he was a big deal. He was 86 years old. You know how the New York Times has sections in it? He invented the sections. Papers didn't have sections. It was Lou Silverstein. He was my boss. And he would torture me. So he would always ask me to do crazy things. And every now and say, Lou, this can't be done. And he goes, yes, it can. And that's why I hired you. So I don't know. I don't want to say it can't be done. I'd sooner say I don't know how yet. Good question. All right. Let me just get back to basics here. I'm going to put the appearance palette away. And I'm going to click something different because I want to keep it simple. So let me just simplify something I want to be clear about. I used the brushes palette as a portal just to get to the libraries. But if that's all you're going to do with it, there's several other places one can find the libraries. I don't want to go over them all because I don't think it makes much sense. You know, I think it would be a waste of your time. I'm going to stick with this approach. So here's my brush palette, which I've overpopulated with stuff. I really used it just to open the first library. But once I had any library out, I'm going to just put this aside. And I could just use the arrows at the bottom of the current library. Let's see what comes next. Almost never use this one. Wild though. So this is imitating an actual pen that has multiple points. Scroll pen. I'm going to click to the next. These watercolor brushes, I've not used enough. I've seen some of my students do an incredible job with them though. They do let you change color. And you know, in fact, now that I think about it, one of the samples that I showed you last week had a flood in it. And I was filled with admiration for how this woman did the flood in New Orleans from the Katrina hurricane. And it looks to me now, a lot of these brushes, a lot of artistic watercolor. All right, I'm not going to go over all the brushes. I just want to go over a couple more things. These are patterns for borders, which can be a lot of fun. And then there's more. All right. So let's back up a minute. On the one hand, you could work with a straight up stroke, right? Any color you want, but change the width to have variable widths, right? And we did that from the stroke palette. On the other hand, you could use completely different looks that are coming from the brush libraries. If you have the nerve, you could actually mix them. So I want you to have a look at this. So I've got this here, and I'm looking at the control panel this time, up top. So I'd like, if you want to join me, choose your simplest leaf that you have. And on the top, the control panel is giving me a little information. It's 8 points. I've got a variable width turned on. And over here, where it says brush definition, it's saying basic. Now I want to stop everything for a minute. There are a lot of articles on the web, frustrated articles, usually involving the brush tool and these these brush definitions. And they're like, oh, I keep setting a definition, but every time I draw with my brush, it resets to basic. That's a common problem, and I really can't find a reliable solution. So I'll often start with a plain line and add the styles afterwards, like we're doing today, right? So I just want to point out a couple little things. If you did come up here, you're probably seeing every brush you tried this morning. I'm going to choose one. Right? I'd like you to do the same. Now, what's interesting here, in my case, I got the brush definition. So this really came from a library, but I lost the variable width. And I often look at the control panel on top to get information like that. It says uniform. That means it's not variable. Will it let me change it? In this case, yes. So I'm using both a variable width and a brush definition. So, for years I've dreaded this subject, only because there's so many anomalies. There's so many weird, oh, this one brush won't let you mix them. That is so much of that, right? That I've just made peace with. I'm going to have to tell you to experiment. If you want to start with just the stroke palette, work with variable width, that makes sense. It's clean, it's clear, it works. If you really need surface, you're going to need those brush libraries out. If you're greedy, like me, you may need both. You're going to find yourself looking up here in the control panel very often because the other panels don't seem to give you both. But I am being a little cheap. Has anyone noticed the properties palette yet? So if you choose one of your leaves, see what the properties palette has to say. Look, mine is currently saying with profile, and it's telling me the brush definition. So what does this teach us? That Illustrator can be confusing because it gives us too many choices, right? So I want to say this, know thyself. If you want to keep it simple, here's my advice. I'm going to make believe I'm first starting, so let me just put a couple things away. If I was confused and I wanted to just boil all this down, I would start with a plain drawing like we began with today. I would get to know the stroke palette first. Window menu stroke. And all I really care about is the weight and this feature at the bottom. Brush definition. Honestly, that's going to go a far way. The strokes this semester were boring, weren't they? Really, and the first project and second project could have really used these. It was just too soon. The last project, probably not much. All right. If that is clear as a bell for you and you want to go further, then I would open up the brush palette, brushes. And the default brushes palette, I want to see if I could reload it. Just give me a second here. Guess not. Too bad. Usually it starts with just a handful of ugly brushes. So the real secret with this is the library button. Which one would I say to start with? Artistic. This one's got a lot of room. I would try all of these in artistic. There's other good ones, but this is a great place to start. Sorry, got a little lost. I'd open up one. I might even put my brushes palette away. I might. If you choose to mix the two big subjects today, variable width and brush definition, you want to keep the control panel out where you could look at it and get to know it. It's rather confusing, I have to admit, but it does save the day when things get out of control. Does anybody have any question for me yet? I want to mention one more thing on this topic though. What about making lines that are not for closed shapes at all? I want you to hear this because I've been avoiding this subject for 12 weeks. I've been pushing closed shapes on you because you can't get good at this program until you embrace them. But once you know the power of the closed shape, what about lines on top? You know, if I'm drawing a hand, right, maybe I need the lines for, you know, that are on it. You know, if I'm drawing a face and it's old, maybe I need the wrinkles. So those are going to be lines on top of the closed shape. There's a few ways to go about it. I'd like for you to pick one of your leaves. Pick the simplest one you could find. And I want you to join me on an experiment. First, I'd like to get this down to the most basic look possible. So you're picking one of your leaves, and I'd like you to look on top at the control panel. Let's look at the variable width menu there and set it to uniform. Then take a look on the right, and if yours looks like a brush, scroll up and see if you could set it to basic. So right now, I'm at the beginning. It's a simple line drawing. Now, some of you are clicking basic and the line will not go back to the basic look. This happens to people. I really don't know what causes it, but I do know a fix, right? If you will not go back to basic, choose one of these from the top. And then after that, click basic. It's a cheat. It just means these are all very similar to the basic setting. In other words, don't be so fancy. Don't look like any of these. Just give me a solid line. These are all solid anyway. All right, now, I did that because I do want you to know how to back up. Right now, what I want you to do is two things. Set that stroke up the way you want it. We're leaving basic again. Use any of the features you want, either width or brush stroke or both, right? And also give me a fill color because we're going to add some details. So right now, I'm going to pick some stuff for myself. I made a mess. Give me a minute. So one of my libraries, making it thicker. I'm changing even the profile. I'm not feeling any of these. I'm going to stick with this. All right, so I got a line I kind of like. I like this better. I could change that stroke color. If you want to change yours, go right ahead. Bring the stroke box in front like you always would. Pick a color. I'd also like you to give it a fill. So I bet you a lot of you are imagining what the rest of that leaf's going to look like, right? It'll probably have a spine, right? Maybe these little branch-like things coming off of it. How would I draw it? Now, I want to stop for a minute and I want to tell you very bluntly that this is your teacher's own prejudice, right? So I want to be fair. There's two ways to go and I have a preferred one for myself. We'll see whether you agree. The two ways I would do it would be either the pencil tool, which we hit pretty hard in this class, but a lot of people would want to use the brush tool. The idea of the brush tool is it should be drawing with the current settings, right? The pencil tool, though, does just about the same thing. Strangely, though, I find the pencil tool more agreeable. It's better at letting me edit a line that I don't like. It's better at letting me changing options. I really don't know why. My hunch is that the paintbrush is probably going to be the tool if I had a tablet. So right now, I'm going to go right to the pencil because I have a contentious relationship with the brush tool. So I'm going to go for the pencil tool. And this is all I'm going to do. Let's see if it honors the settings that I already have. And it did. So I was using a setting. The only thing I want to remind you is it thinks you might want to edit lines. So if you don't want it to, deselect in between lines. That one's done. I use the black arrow to click off. I'm going to go back and get this, and I could start adding any details that I think might add to it. But I'm going to deselect in between. I'm holding down Command, by the way, to make that a little friendlier. Command, click off, since the Command key gets me the last arrow tool, just to make sure I don't constantly redraw things. All right, I hope that's helpful. I know some of you will do some fabulous line drawings in your life, and you might want the freedom to scale them to infinity, and only Illustrator does that, you know, of the big Adobe set. Photoshop can't do that. So if you do this in Photoshop, you're limited to that size. You know, you can't blow it up. If you do it in Illustrator, you could keep on changing the size. All right, I want to look at my own handout for a minute, because I want to make sure that I'm right about the next thing. All right, clipping masks. I have a plan for you regarding clipping masks. Before I leave though, does anybody have a question about brushes or outlines, strokes, that type of thing? The world of line in our vector. I'm sure you have questions that you can't work out. They're the ones that you might have to experience on your own. We'll see. Listen, folks, I want to tell you what I need next. I want to take a few leaves, arrange them, right, and then wrap them in a circle. So what I really want is a circular window. So some of my leaves are going to stick out. I'll only see the part that's inside. Now, have we done clipping masks before? I thought so, right? So this is, if you don't remember, don't feel bad. We did it kind of quickly, right? So right now is a chance to rethink it, right? So a clipping mask is a window, and you only see what's in that window. If this was a clipping mask, you'd only see my face right now. My head would be hidden. The wall, everything would be hidden. So what I want to do is do that with some leaves. So I'm going to get my black arrow, delete some stuff I don't need. I'm going to take this one leaf here, and guys, maybe we should group it. If your leaf is complicated, we should probably group all the parts. Otherwise, this is going to happen. Wow, that looks good up there, but I'm going to put it back. So I'm going to select my leaf with all its parts first, and I'm going to group it. We did grouping on the first day of class, by the way. So I could do object menu group or just plain old Command G, which is really what I prefer. The only reason I'm doing that is because I want to move it easily, but I want to make some copies. So this is really what I'm after. I'd like you to make some kind of arrangement with your leaves that we could then put in a clipping mask to make some kind of logo-like object out of it. And I'm winging this. I don't exactly have a plan. I'm making all these changes with the black arrow, by the way. Yours does not have to look the same as mine. Just have a little quick fun with it. So if I was going to make a logo, right, for a plant nursery, you know, a place that sells plants, I might start with something like this. Maybe I'd like a circular logo, though, and they could put it on their business card and their letterhead and all their stuff. Are you guys ready to make the clipping mask? Now, here's the idea. The mask has got to be smaller than the stuff that's going to be behind the mask. So what I mean is this. I'm going to get the ellipse tool, and I'm going to place myself in ellipse about here. Now I want to point out that all the stuff, I'm going to change the fill just so you can see what I mean. All this stuff sticking out is going to be hidden. If you want to be exact, you could turn the fill off temporarily and move the circle around so you could see what you're doing, right? So I could do that and then just get my black arrow and try to get it exactly right while looking at it. I feel pretty sure, though, that it's going to need a fill for the mask to work. Not 100% sure. But once it's in the right spot, at least, Make sure it's got that color there. Look, folks, usually I just wing it. I'll just drop it down there, trust myself, see if it works. Okay, the object on top is the clipping object, right? So that's one rule. It's got to be the top of the pile. Now we're about to do this, and I want to mention one warning. So you need to hear this. The worst thing about clipping masks is they steal everything from layers and put it all on one layer. So if you have an important layer structure, this will ruin it. So it means if you're going to use clipping masks, you have to make some, strategic decision. Let's see. Okay, I would like you to select all the shapes in the mask and the mask. If there were other objects, you don't have to select them. They'd be left out. That's fine. So you only select the ones you want to participate in the whole clipping process. Then go to the object menu, clipping mask, make. I'm going to Command Z that just so I could say it again. You need to select everything that you want to participate. So I guess to be clear about it, in other words, if I had a different shape and I didn't want that shape involved, I'd just be careful not to select it. I'm using the Shift key to choose carefully. Then object menu, clipping mask, make. So this object back there is independent, but I don't really need it. All right, question one, did it work? So, this is a very cool feature. I've used it for logos like this, sort of, but I've also used it for the window of a car. I had to draw these people in a car, and I never really liked that business of trying to draw half of a head. I'd just rather draw it. I use the shape of the window as a mask. It's pretty cool. Let's see what we could do with the mask once it's made. Okay. The mask is a group also. So some of us have a group made of little groups. If you didn't make a group for your leaf, yours is a little simpler. But on this level, they're all groups, which basically means the black arrow will move it, scale it, rotate it, but it won't let you work on parts. So I just want to go over quickly how to work with groups. I'm only doing it because clipping masks made a group without asking you, right? So there's two popular ways. One is double click the group with the black arrow. Let's try that first. Get the black arrow, double click on your group. You'll see a gray bar showed up. It says clipping group. While you're here, you could click on anything you want and move it around. Pretty interesting. You could make changes. That's one method. It's not the method I usually use, but it's a good one, right? It's called isolation mode. If you double click a lot, you're often coming here by mistake, right? Because you could double click anything in this program to isolate it. Let's leave isolation mode. I want to remind you of the other method. So to leave isolation mode, you see the gray bar above your image. You head to the left and there's a white arrow there. You click it until you're all the way back. So if you're in isolation mode, remember how to get out. This little light goes back a level, click it again until you're all the way back. That's a good method. And I think the only reason I don't use it is I used Illustrator for many years before this came out. But you might like the other method also. It's all about the white arrow. The white arrow's real name is the direct selection tool, which implies it'll directly select any part for any reason. So let's see what it would do. Get the white arrow, click on a leaf, and see if you could move it. Now mine was grouped, so it's only moving the leaf shape. But it's working. I could change its fill if I want. I could change its stroke if I want. I could click on its parts if I wanted to adjust them. What's interesting though is, I want to mention something kind of quickly. Actually, I want to get to the clipping shape itself. How would you give it a background color? This is a little weird, right? But easy. So I want to share it with you. Could you make sure you have nothing selected? Click off if necessary. Then make sure you have the white arrow only. The black arrow, as I said, is only going to move this thing around. But the white arrow is going to let me do the fancy tricks. What I want you to do is, with the white arrow, I want you to sneak up on the edge until the path lights up. Now that's the clipping object itself. I want you to click it when you get there. At that stage, you could fill it, or stroke, or both. So you have to sneak up on it with the white arrow to make sure you're not selecting the whole set, just the clipping object. And now you could say, oh yeah, I do want a stroke color. Or maybe I do want to fill. The thing that I find weird about that is, didn't we put that shape on top? So it's kind of weird that it works as a background. It was the last shape you drew. We call it the clipping object itself, the mask, the clipping mask. The rest of this I call the clipping group. But strangely, by figuring out how to select the masking object, that's how you control the background and the outer shape. Are you guys still okay? So the only thing I'm worried about is people who are really good with layers, and they name their layers and everything's there for a good reason, it does this and then your layers are destroyed. So really, I'd only do this on a simple pile of objects that are okay sharing a layer. I want to mention this. Early in the class, we did a heart exercise when I wanted to teach you about the white arrow. We were doing stuff like this. Now, it's been a long time and you've learned a lot of things. So you might not remember what the steps were. And it's not that I really want to repeat them. I just want to point out how cool it is to actually be able to use, the variety of techniques we've been learning. So I just want to mention, I'm going to bring this back to where it was. So it's always the white arrow that lets you do that. All I was doing was using the anchors, but making sure that they didn't seesaw. So you probably do remember this, at least I hope you do. On a Mac, it's the Option key that breaks the seesaw. On Windows, it's Alt. So I don't know, this might make a nice, decent peach. Any questions about clipping masks? So guys, something, Juliana, you have a question about it? No?
I did.
Christina,
How did
please.
you get the stroke on the outside of the clipping mask again?
Yeah, and something, I noticed something recently about that stroke that I should probably mention. The way that it worked was, to get at it, I had to make sure that I'm on the root level. In other words, I'm not in isolation mode. I mean, there's other ways to do it, but on the root level, use the white arrow. Make sure nothing is selected. So if necessary, click out and sneak up on the edge. You should see anchor points, handles. At that stage, all you do is bring the stroke box in front, and choose a color. If you wanted to go further, I would start with the stroke palette. Except for one thing that I want to mention. But first off, Christina, does it work?
I'm still pressing buttons.
Deselect the whole thing, the whole clipping mask. Make sure you deselected it. Then get the white arrow. And I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
When you sneak up on it with the white arrow, does a path light up in blue for you?
No.
All right, I'd like you to go to the view menu with me.
Oh, it just did.
It just did. Okay. So
Sorry.
what I was going to mention was this is the feature we're using. They're called smart guides. And sometimes people turn it off by accident, which makes this very hard. The only thing that I want to mention to you guys that I don't like is the clipping mask doesn't seem to let me stroke with a variable width or with brushes. And that's a little disappointing, but I'm going to have to live with it.
I think that's what answered my question because I
Is
was
that what the problem was?
brush. Okay.
You know what? I only noticed that today. I've been doing this for like 20 something years, but I never noticed that. So it's another one of those, you know, out of the textbook problems. All right. Any questions for me? Anybody? No. I want to get a look at the handout. We're probably due for a break. And we are indeed. You know something, before we break it, and I know you guys really need a break, it's just one thing I want to show you because I know some of you have been up against this, the problem of margins. And I want to show you a trick that I have that you're welcome to steal from me if you like it. You know how sometimes I've given you some freedom with margins? You could go over the margin, but whatever, some kind of rule about it. Other times I'm like, oh no, I need a strict margin. So it's pretty interesting when you're working, very often they say, look, we're going to have a 1/2 inch margin. You can ignore it, but when we go to press, every print is going to come out with a 1/2 inch white border. Now for me, I need to see the border. I'm not willing to wait for 10,000 copies to come off of a printing press to see that it ruined what I had in mind. So I need a quick, easy way to create a fake border. So this is going to be about the Pathfinder, right? And you might, yes.
All I can see is the daily sheet.
Right now, yeah, that's because I'm not doing anything yet.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought you
Yeah.
were.
No, I'm about to show you.
Okay. Never
So I
mind.
want to show you guys something. If I want to, here I am now. We're back in Illustrator. This is the problem. Let's say I'm working for somebody and maybe they're producing posters and they're warning me in advance that I'm going to have a 1/2 inch margin. I don't really want to have to draw this thing with one flat side. It's just too difficult. So I need a method, don't I? Right? Now, I could peek at what it looks like without the gray, but that's not what I want. I can go to View, Trim View, but it still doesn't show me the margin. So it's not really what I'm talking about. I'm going to go back where I was. Give me a second. Shouldn't have clicked that because there we go. So here's the way I do it, but I'm going to produce a slightly larger mess. This is not industry standard, what I'm about to show you. I just want you to see it. Ira's secret recipe for having visible margins. Step 1 is use your guides and start with real margins. So I'm going to do that kind of quickly. So I've done this in front of you guys before, so I'm going to be very quick right now. I'm doing it with the navigator. I got to turn my rulers on. Come on. There we go. And I'm going to drag down a 1/2 inch margin. Just give me a second here. I've got a little thing I want to change. I don't want to get into too much detail. I want to show you just the trick. By now, everybody should have their confidence about making the margin. Let me just see if that feels right, because I am acting a little hasty. All right, so you see the margins, but as an artist, again, listen, if you guys are good at ignoring that, that's fine. You know, maybe you're good at imagining it in your head. I'm not. I need to see them. So this is what I do. On the top, I'm going to make two shapes and turn them into a window. And here's the way it's going to go. Let me just make some room for myself. I want to see the whole page. So I'm just backing up a little bit. Sorry about this. I'm getting a little sloppy. I need a break also. I'm going to get the rectangle tool, and the first shape is going to be the exact size of the page. So I'm literally going to cover it exactly. I'm going to leave that. And then I'm going to make a shape. Let me just get the stroke down so no one's confused by that. Then I'm going to make another rectangle inside the margins. It looks like I made a mistake here, so I'm going to cheat. Give me 1 second, guys. Sorry about that. I'm going to just fake it. Actually, I think that's about right. Give me 1 second. This is, I'm got a little off map. There we go. So anyway, I drew the big shape, the same size as the page. Now I'm going to draw a smaller page inside the margin. Do you remember how the Pathfinders was really good at punching holes in things? We used the Pathfinders for two things. We made a snowman, you know, we attached shapes. But later on, we made a lamp and we took bites out of the shape. I'm going to use that second feature. Window menu, Pathfinder. The only two Pathfinders we tried was this one and this one beneath it. This one's divide. I'm about to use it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the big rectangle. I'm going to hold down Shift and also select the little rectangle. Let me just make sure I got them both. I'm going to change the color of one of them so we could see it a little better. Hang on a second, right? Your teacher's losing it, and I should back off because I'm not doing a good demo. There's the big shape. I thought I made the small one, but I didn't. So let me go do it now. This is what I get for not calling a break when I should have. All right, now it's a little bit easier, right? I got one shape back there. That's the big one. Currently, there it is, a big red shape. I got a shape in the margin that's black. I need to select them both. One, holding down Shift, getting the other one. And as long as they're both selected, I'll be fine. This is divide. At that point, I click off and get the white arrow. That's my margin. I can make it white, and I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to do this one more time because I'm unhappy with it. I'm going to just do it better. I do want to mention, some of you have done this for the outside, where you hide the outer shapes, but I want to point out that's not necessary. The shapes outside the page can be hidden from the view menu trim. So this is what's going to print. I'm going to undo all that just so I could do it very quickly, but a little bit better. All right. You'd have to be careful that your guides are correct. On the top, you're going to put a shape, and I'm only going to make mine colored so it's easy for you to see what I'm doing. This is going to be white by the time I'm done. Right now, I'm making it yellow. That's the page. Same size as the page. I'm going to deselect it, change my color, and make a new rectangle. This one's inside the safe part, the part in the margin. The whole idea is to select both those shapes and use divide. These are now separate shapes. That black thing in the middle is independent. So I'm going to click off, get the white arrow to delete it. This is a trick that I use often in my own work. And I'll make it white. That's what the margin looks like. If anything's sticking way out, I'll use the view menu instead. Trim view. Is that helpful to anybody in here? So I got to tell you something. Everybody's got a trick for this. There's no norm. I wish there was. I know a lot of, like I said, a lot of people who just have a lot of practice, they just ignore it. They put the margin down. So at least psychologically, they're like, well, the gun better not be past the margin, right? It's going to ruin the illustration. You know, but they don't mind things sticking out. They know, well, in the end, I'll get my 10,000 copies. They're going to have that white. I need to see it. All right, folks, let's take a break. It's 5 o'clock. We're going to take a 20-minute break, come back at 5:20. I know it's a little short, but there's still a little bit more to do, right? And I would like to make some time to peek at some people's work. So let's come back at 5:20. I'll see you then. Don't be late. 5:20. And we're back. All right, I'm going to give everyone a minute just to, get settled again. So, before we jump in, I want to just talk a little bit more about the technology we've been using and what's left this semester. Illustrator is a very large program, but what I like about it is even knowing a fraction of it is incredibly powerful. I mean, frankly, if we had just done, say, the pencil tool, the layers palette, and basic color, you would already been off the ground and running. And almost every other thing we learn is just another option, another opportunity, which basically means the rest of the semester, technically, is going to be more options and more opportunities, but not particularly critical in terms of for all of us. But I have to say, one thing I want to mention, one second there. One thing I want to mention to everybody about Illustrator in general that's not been a big subject for our class is typography. So let's say you become graphic designers. Let's say the whole room here goes ahead, chooses graphic design as a direction. You're going to be using Illustrator, Photoshop, and InDesign. That's going to rule your life. It's going to be those three programs. InDesign is the #1 layout program for all things in print. So all books and magazines, newspapers, all of that is InDesign. Illustrator, well, you've got to know very well what that does, and you probably know more than a little about Photoshop. But what's up with InDesign? And it's not a imaging program like Illustrator is or like Photoshop is. It's devoted to typography and layout. And yet I'm going to say something a dash controversial. If you're doing a layout that's text dominated, lots of words, but it is one page, I would use Illustrator. Only when there's a lot of pages am I going to use InDesign. InDesign's got all the secret magic features for your 20-page magazine, your 30-page newspaper, the catalog that comes in the mail. That's all InDesign. But if it's a poster or a flyer, I'd rather use Illustrator because its type tools are every bit as powerful. They're amazing. It is one of the best typography programs in the world. In fact, if you're going to design your own font, Illustrator might be part of your process. So right now, I want to spend a very short amount of time on just a couple of main features of type in Illustrator, but I do have to add something. There's one small type requirement for the last project, and it might not require much of what I'm about to show you. It's a simple one. You have to integrate the name of your place. So in other words, if it's all about Park Slope, you know, part of Brooklyn, somewhere it has to say Park Slope. Now, it could be boring, but Park Slope, or it could be clever. Street sign, store window, whatever you can come up with. But it does have to say the name of the place. Right? Okay. Let's do a little typography. Could everybody join me back in Illustrator? I'm going to ask you to open up a new document. Any size is fine. And what I need next is I need you to promise you're not going to skip the next step, because every class somebody skips it. The first trick with the type tool is deciding one thing. Should I click or should I drag a box? The type tool will let you do either. Now, if you click, we're going to compare. You could type a word or two and have total control of what you do with the word or two. But if you make a box, you're saying I have a long article and I need to establish the width of my column. And it's going to be less flexible, but also powerful. I want to draw a comparison together. All right, so I'd like everyone to find the type tool. Now, if you press on it, you'll notice there's a lot of type tools. So I'm talking about the first one, just called the type tool. Now, I need you to do this exactly. Please just click. Do not press and drag. You get the type tool, click one time. And it says lorem ipsum, which is dummy text. I'd like you to type in any word, right? So I'm going to write Little Red, right? Making believe I'm working on a children's book. All right, what was cool about that? Well, let me show you. Right, what I'd like you to do next is get the black arrow, hold down Shift, and make it really big.
Professor,
Yes,
are you supposed to be sharing your screen?
I'm so supposed to be, am I not?
No.
And I thought I clicked it. It says, okay, I'll back up. No problem. Thank
you.
you. Second time in one day, I think I did that. All right, give me a second. Here we go. Almost there. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
All right, thank you. You know, thanks for telling me so soon. Sometimes people wait the longest time. All right, so you're getting the type tool. I'd like you to click once. Make believe this is a headline, title of a story, something short. I'm going to write Little Red as though I'm doing a version of Little Red Riding Hood. It's very small. I know that. What I want you to do afterwards, though, is get the black arrow. Now, usually that'll automatically select the text. But if it didn't, just click on it. So we left the type tool. We're in the black arrow now. I want you to hold down Shift and make it as large as you want. So I want to point something out. When you need one word or two words, you want total freedom. You want to be able to make it whatever size you want without guessing at how big it is. Is that 80 points or 83 points? Who knows? Nobody knows, right? So if you just float the text, this is called floated text, you have freedom. Here's what else you can do. You could rotate it. Now I'm going to delete mine just because I want to make my point a little clearer before I move forward. If you take the type tool and click once, do not do this, right? Look what that did. That's for an article. We're going to do that next. But instead, you click once, then just type what you want. This is great for a couple of words. Switch to the black arrow. To scale, you want to hold down Shift, otherwise you're going to distort it. This is wrong. So I'm going to hold down Shift and scale it. I love this because it's so easy to see what I'm doing. It's very visual. Could everybody join me on something though? I'd like you to do Command T if you're on a Mac, or Control T if you're on Windows. Command T or Control T. Now this would have been the other way to change size. I could have done it from here. Oh, that's slow. I could have clicked the larger arrow. but it's still guesswork. And it ends at 72. With my system though, use the black arrow and shift. And those numbers will keep changing, but you could do it visually. Sounds small, it's actually huge. Is this working for everybody? Now what I'm gonna wanna do is put an article next to my headline. So you got a choice. If you wanna put your article underneath it, you could leave the text the way you have it. If you'd like to do something fancy, you could put it on its side, still with the black arrow. And I'm gonna put my article right next to it. I want you to make a quick decision about where you wanna put your text. Remember, it's a headline. But by the way, if you were doing kids' books, you know, some of the stories are, just a handful of words, this little piggy, I might want this little piggy separate so I could change their size and font with total freedom. And I would do it just the way we just did. But if there's a couple hundred words, the rules change. Once there's a lot of words, you want to contain them to show where the column ends. I want you to watch this before you join me. This is the wrong way. You take the type tool, you click, right? And then you start typing or you copy and paste. Now the problem with this is, look at this. How am I going to get that to flow down like a column? It was just wrong. The click method is for a couple of words. But when you have a big article, you get the type tool. This time, you press, oops, just not too close to something else, so give me a minute. You press and drag. Now what this is going to do, it's going to fill up with text. You could type freely, and it's always going to go to the next line. If your text is too big, by the way, just click it with the black arrow and go back to the character palette. Remember, you open this with Command T. I want to make another point. Give me a minute. This is daring. But since I don't have any text with me, I'm just going to choose something kind of random. I could have prepared more text. Come on, just take me somewhere. There we go. I want to prove something. It doesn't matter where I get the text from. You can get it from Microsoft Word. You could type it yourself. Sorry, my computer doesn't like me being in such a hurry. Once I click in that box and paste, oh, I didn't copy it. There we go. It stops at the border. So here's the difference. The text that you floated, some people call it point text. I prefer floated text. I could change easily in terms of size and rotation. The text that went in the box lets me do this, which is even cooler. I could change the shape of the box and it continues to contain the article. Because maybe I need a photo here. Maybe down here goes a photo of Little Red. So I need total control when there's a lot of words. So I'm just going to recap my main point. You click once for a couple of words because that gives you freedom to scale with the black arrow and rotate. You can be very intuitive. But if there's a whole article, don't click, press and drag a box. Because after that, you could still change your type, you just have to do it here. You could change the box with the black arrow. And it gives you a lot of freedom. It's never really obvious where that text should go. So you're not going to need that second skill for my class, but you might for somebody else's. And this logic is true of other programs. When to float and when you want to box. All right, I want to do a couple cool things with you that is more part of the illustrator's world about how we use text. For example, what if I was working for the electric company and they wanted me to give information about saving energy, but they want it in a light bulb? All right, let's make a light bulb and see how we would do that. So, could you clear your screen? We're starting something related. I know I'm going kind of quickly because it's sort of fringe stuff, but I would like you to join me on this one. I'd like you to empty your page because I want you to make a light bulb with the Pathfinder. So you're going to put down a big circle. I want you to overlap it with a rectangle. I'm going to make them different colors just so you can see what I mean. So if you got the job, you're going to do an illustration, but in the illustration needs to be a big light bulb filled with text, right? You draw the light bulb however you want. But right now we're in a hurry, so I want to use the Pathfinder. So if you've gotten this far, I want you to select the two shapes. I'm going to hold down Shift and get the Pathfinder. It might have been out from earlier. I'm going to use this button, but if yours is missing, just go to the window menu and click this, Unite. Remember, you could still make changes with the white arrow if there were changes you wanted to make. Now, right now, I'm pretty okay with mine. All right, I'm going to keep it simple, though I am tempted to go further. I see I'm running a little low on time. How would you fill this with text? I just want to say for the record, I would probably want the cool shape at the bottom of the light bulb, which I'm tempted to talk about, but we don't have time for it. So I'm just going to leave that. I want to introduce you to the area type tool. So if you go to your toolbar and find the type tool you were using earlier, I'd like you to press on it. Now, there's about 6 of these, 7, but we only care about the top 3. You use the type tool just before. I want the area type tool now. The way it works, you don't click inside the shape. You click on the edge. In other words, you click on the path. Automatically, it fills it with Latin dummy text, what we just call lorem ipsum. So what you would do is you'd go get your article and paste it in. Unless you're a great typist, you just type over this. So you'd highlight it if you needed to make a change. And paste over it. This is the stuff I stole from CNN. All right, it's kind of satisfying, but not completely. And I think one of the problems is the left edge looks better than the right edge, right? And that's easy to see if you just click off completely. The left edge hugs the wall, so it really keeps that shape. The right edge we call ragged, and it goes in and out. So I'd like you to click on that text with the black arrow. If you see these lines, it means it's selected. And I'd like you to go back to the character palette. Now you might remember I said Command T to open it. And a great way to remember that is think of it as the type palette or the text palette, right? Command T. But you'll notice when you do that, it comes with the paragraph palette also. That gives us interesting choices. I don't want to center it because then both edges are ragged. Look like that. Doesn't even look like a light bulb. I don't want this because now the right side looks good, but the left side looks bad. You want the fourth option over, right? That's called justify. and it tries to go all the way to the left and all the way to the right. And that fills the bulb up in a more satisfying way. So that's on the paragraph palette. It came when you open the character palette. They come as a team. And we're using the 4th alignment option. You guys okay? The question then becomes is, what about changing the text or changing the light bulb? Like, let's say you want a new font or a new color for the text, but you want a different color for the light bulb. All right, the black arrow selects the text. So if you click with the black arrow, you could choose color. That would be a fill color, by the way. So it's up to you what color. The white arrow will let you choose the light bulb. This is a very similar trick that I shared with you earlier with clipping masks. Deselect and get the white arrow. So if you're still selected, just click outside, get the white arrow instead. If you sneak up on it, you'll see the edge. At that point, click it. You can give it its own fill color. So I want to remind you of 2 things. The white arrow will let you select the object itself by sneaking up on it and clicking the edge. The black arrow gets the text. You notice I'm skipping obvious things, like how do you change the font, right? Because that's the same in every program. It's the same in your email, right? So all I'm going to do is come over here to the character palette, find my fonts, and pick something. Change the size from here. Now look, if I was your typography teacher, I would go a lot deeper than this, you know. But I do want to say, wherever you learn about typography, try what you learn here, because Illustrator is amazing when it comes to working with type. It does all kinds of tricks. You know about floating text, you know about text in a box, and now you know about text in a shape. I want to do 2 more things with that light bulb. One, I just don't like the edge. It looks pretty weird. Hang on a minute there. The text should not be touching the edge like that. I just don't like it. And there's more than one way to fix it, but one might be here. Not the character palette, the paragraph palette. My goal is to get the text a little away from the edge of the light bulb. So this feature here is left margin. Look what it'll do. Nice. The one beside it is the right side margin. I think I'm going to match the number. I have 15 points on the left. I'm putting 15 on the right. Nice. Now, I don't think you're going to need this from me either, but I don't know, maybe. I want to throw one more thing in though, because this is probably the #1 request people have for type in Illustrator, and that's type on a path. So imagine this light bulb had a headline over the top that said something like save energy, and you wanted to go follow that same curve. That's what we want to do next. And it's pretty easy. The first step is draw the curve. Now I want to curve up here, and so the pen tool is definitely the best candidate. Just cleaning up because I have a big mess. Let's get the pen tool. I want one curve over the top. So watch what I'm going to do. I press and drag to tell it it's going to go this way. Then I come to the opposite side and I press and pull to finish the curve. I don't need that color, so I'm going to take it out. I'm going to do it again. I get the pencil. If you want an easy time, you could turn your fill color off. press and pull it up to say, I want the curve to go up, not down, up. I move across, trying to find that central line, and I press and I pull down to finish the curve. Naturally, to perfect it, you switch to the wide arrow. Unless you're using shortcuts, you make your changes with the wide arrow, like we always do, especially when using the pen tool. All right. When you have a path you like, we're ready to put type on it. The good news is you'll be able to change the path even after the type is on it. So we have a lot of freedom. We want the third type tool. We're only going to use these three. I rarely touch the others, but this one's pretty popular. Type on a path. Now you might have guessed it. We're going to click on the path you just made. So I'd like you to click on it. Gives you some dummy, and you could just type what you want to say. I'm going to write save energy. And we do need to make some changes. I want to mention, though, don't put long speeches on a path because no one's going to read it. It might look cool, but no one will read it. So it's really good for just a few words. All right, so I've got it on. I want to show you something here that I would recommend on the paragraph palette. I would switch to the first option, which is left aligned. And the reason is when I get the black arrow, this little line shows up and I could drag it back and forth to position it. This line, whoops, not that one. Let me put that back. Just this little vertical line. It moves it back and forth like it's on a roller coaster. If I had it right aligned, that would be very confusing. The text insists on staying on the right. Very difficult, or even justified. This is obvious. And this way you could pull it where you want. I keep on dragging the whole thing. I mean to just take that line. You'd use the character palette for the usual stuff, like size. You'd use a fill color. And at any point, you could just pull it back with the black arrow to get the position. Keep moving it. And you could tell I'm off the ground. There's little things I don't like, weird spaces in my bulb, but this gets us pretty darn close. Is this working? So it's really pretty, the original idea is basic, you know, which is draw a path, and you could use the pencil tool if you wanted, right? It's just that the pen tool's smoother. The fill is a little confusing, so I'm taking it out. I'm going to put a stroke on it just so you could see what I'm doing. I'm going to go ahead and get the type on a path tool. Type what I want. And I'll get the black arrow to select it. If anything disappears, it's the text is too big or the path is too small. So you'll make a lot of changes on the character palette regarding font and size. Use the usual tools for color. I want to mention a last thing though. It's kind of cool that you could use the wide arrow whenever you want. When you have type on a path or in a big shape, the wide arrow does real miraculous stuff, like this. So whatever I do, the text responds. So you have a lot of choices in the way of making changes and edits. I generally prefer to get a clean set of options early. But if I don't, click the path to change it, click the text to change the text. Anything's going to change in the same way. The white arrow is powerful. That was a lot in a short amount of time. I hope that wasn't merciless. It's just, I could have easily skipped this semester. It's not really on my course agenda. It's just too cool to keep to myself. And what's more, there is a small text requirement, as I said. You do want to name the city. By the way, like if you want to hand draw the name of your city, that's okay. It does have to be named. So you could do it any way you like that just strikes you as beautiful or smart.
I have a question.
Yes.
So we have like complete liberty with the text. Like, could we put it in the water? Could we hide it in like a window?
Yes, you have complete liberty. The only requirement is that it works. You know how us artists like to say that? You know, that it feels satisfying. But yeah, you could put it in the water. You could put it in a window. I prefer creative ideas like that. I really do.
And I'm thinking like if it's in the water, like I'm trying to think of like blending it in artistically, but would you like it to stand out more and be more like bold and obvious?
You know, I don't have a strong opinion as long as it's not too subtle to matter.
Okay.
You know, it's an important feature. You know, the idea of this project is a weird bridge from reality to imagination. And it only matters if we know where you're talking about. You know, if some of you are lucky enough to travel, you know what it's like to imagine the place you're going and then be utterly shocked when you get there because it's never the place you imagined, you know. But life is always like that. You know, you go out on a blind date and you're like, wow, that's the coolest person ever. I'm like in love. But, you know, it takes a few weeks and you're like, ugh, that person's mean. Or they don't laugh at my jokes. That's a deal breaker. But I'm just saying the whole idea of going from the imagination and bridging reality is the heart of what we're working on with this project. Real places taken to a fantastic place. You know, fantastic evolution. So I do need to know what it is. If the text's too small or just too wild that I can't read it, it would be disappointing. Any other questions? Guys, we're going to wrap it up right now. I want to look at the handout to make sure that I don't forget anything urgent. With the tail end of my course, the things that are urgent are about the project. But the techniques we learn, you'll figure out what works for you and what doesn't. Some of you guys are going to go into graphic design and you're going to want more type. I'm an illustrator, but also a graphic designer, and it's really helped me. I worked on a couple children's books. And I got to ask the right questions from the team, figured out where I'm the guy. I had to do maps for children. I needed a lot of type. Needed to draw, but I needed the type, you know. So anyway, let's get a look at the handout. Oh, that's still, you know, give me a minute here. There we go. There's no surprises on this handout, but I do want to remind you, these are the samples. These are a handful of things. They all got A's. Honestly, I think you guys are going to do better, but they all got A's. It's got to be an Illustrator. This is the first digital draft. This is what you should currently have. I'm not going to reread it. I feel like I've talked enough about the concept today, but I do want you to keep this word in mind, inventive. You know, if your project's not inventive, it's just good looking. You got halfway there. You know, what about it is invented? So you should have already selected the place, but I don't really mind if you change your mind now that maybe you feel it differently. But, you know, ideally you would have selected the place already, analyzed it. And when I say analyze it, I just mean, what do I need to communicate this place? You know, do I need berets and bottles of wine and red roses? Do I need, you know, muggers? Do I need the Brooklyn Bridge? You know, what do I need to help communicate a place? So that's what I meant really by research and analysis, and that you've gathered photos to help. But the real question that you have to ask yourself is, what are you emphasizing, or what are you exaggerating? You know, what's your angle? What's your angle? You know, how did you transform it? Is it just the place? You want it to be more. All right, now once you got the gathered photos, it's up to you how you use them. If you have the need to use file menu place, you're all experts on that now. You go right ahead. If you just like to have the photos around to help glance and draw, I do a lot of that myself. But you still want the photos where you could get them easily. You're going to use those and your sketches and whatever else you could think of to create the first digital draft. These are the only dimensions I'll accept. The only thing I will let you change that is switch these numbers. This is wide, what we call landscape. But if the vision you have is vertical, I'm fine with that. Switch them. I want the 5-inch margin to be completely honored. I don't want anything in the margin at all. So you might want to use my trick from today or any method that you like.
Does that mean you want blank space, or you just don't want anything important in the margin?
I want blank space. And you know the reason why, to be honest, I know some people took my own creative license and took too much license. You know, they were not really learning how to deal with a margin. And frankly, you're going to deal with it all the time. I worked in news. We always had a margin. You know what I mean? And I made posters. They definitely had margins. I loved doing both those jobs, but I really had to get used to the idea that I can't sprawl right up to the edge all the time. You know, sometimes you can, you know, if you're in a lucky environment with the right equipment, the right goal. But I just want people to see what that's like, just to deal with it. Good questions. All right, make sure that you've used type in some way to name your place, right? Even if I okayed a town or a hybrid of two places, you have to figure out how to deal with that in terms of type. All right, next class. This is what I want, named just like this. Please do not improvise, right? I get a lot of work, a couple of 1,000 pieces a year. So this system is practical. It's pretty much the same we've been doing. Project 4, draft 1. And you're going to just drop it in the folder. That's all I'm going to need. Any questions? Well, I'm still conscious. You know? So listen, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I was asked to spend a few minutes. I think it was Rachel, right? Who'd asked me earlier. I'm going to take a peek at sketches with Rachel. If anybody else would like to do that with me, I'll do my best. I don't know how many I could do today. We will look closer. I have to cross my fingers, so I have to look at next week's stuff. But I do want to look more often before last week, so people feel more confident that they're you know, on a good path. So those of you who have to leave or just want to leave, this is a 3-hour class. It's long. You know, don't feel bad at all. I took attendance already. Take off. If you feel like sticking around, stick around a little.
Oh, what would we be sticking around for?
What's that?
What would we be sticking around for?
A couple people want me to look at their sketches.
All right.
Yeah, so it's like, you know, depends how you're feeling right now. You know, there are days I'm a bottomless pit. It's art. I'm like, give me more. The other days I'm like, brain stop. Sorry. I need an outgoing message. Please leave a message where my brain comes back. So Mike, it's on you. I'm going to start with Rachel. Anyone who's leaving, let me just say goodbye. Folks, thanks for all the awesome work. I know it's hard work, but I get very excited when I see how good it is. I mean, your last projects were just awesome by and large. And everybody in here scored on at least one of the 3. Some of you scored huge on all 3. So the progress is just great to see. And I enjoyed the sketches too. Anyway, Rachel's going to go first. So anyone wants to stick around, I hope she doesn't mind. Rachel, you there?
Thank you, Professor. Have a great week.
Yeah,
Bye.
you too.
Thank
See
you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Everyone is gone. See you
Thank
next
you.
class.
Thank
I'm
you.
going to stop my share in the meantime. Give the wheel over to Rachel. Rachel, you could screen share.
Okay, hold on just one second.
Okay.
Hey, Rachel, I'm just sticking around to watch what's going on.
Okay.
We're supportive.
Can you see my screen? I
Yes.
know. Okay.
Yeah, I can. Oh
So
yeah, what a good drawing. I love this drawing. Let me get this. Wow.
I don't have like too much of the imaginative, like reimagined parts put in it yet.
Well, you do have a giant woman.
Yeah, have you seen the new Blade Runner movie?
No, should I?
That's just kind of what it inspired me from, is like it's set in the future and a lot of their digital marketing is like kind of like a iPhone display, like a 3D projection out into the real world.
I see.
But I don't know. I just wanted, I don't know.
Well,
I
can
feel
I
like
ask you a
it's,
question or two? First off, so the drawing is completely original, though. Am I right?
well, it's based off a photo.
So it's based off of a photograph. Are you sure it's not based on an illustration or anything like that?
Yeah, I kind of traced some of this from a photo.
Can I see the photo?
I don't have it on my computer.
You don't.
Mm-mm.
So again, if you're sure that it's a photo and it's not like a photo illustration, for example, where someone else did the hard work, you know, and like combined photos and made a photographic image out of it, that I wouldn't accept. If this is a photo that someone took, say, right down this avenue, a straight up photo, and you're using that I would accept. Do you understand the difference?
Yeah, yeah, and it is a photo. I've
Yeah.
been to this street in person.
Okay. And the
Yeah.
girl, the big woman, did you add that?
Yeah, I did.
So I want to say something. For one, I just love the way you draw a trace or not. It's just got a great feel. Um, the gigantic woman, I kind of like the idea when you combine it with some things you said. And basically the word advertising and the way advertising in the future might look, that interests me. So right now, it doesn't say much about that. Now, if you wanted to show us San Francisco in 20, 30 years, then the walls of some of those buildings can be covered in ads. They could look like projections. They could look like cell phones. Then that giant woman there makes some kind of sense because she could be a projection,
Mm-hmm.
or you're just having fun with how big the ads are. For example, if you go to our 42nd Street in Manhattan right now, it looks more and more like Blade Runner every day. You go there at night, every single building is turned into a projected ad.
Yeah.
Have you seen it?
Yeah, I've been there before.
Yeah, especially at night. It's just wild. I mean, I was, born in this city, but I love Blade Runner, by the way, the original as well as the book that it came from, which is called "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?" But that whole idea of a futuristic San Francisco overtaken with advertising, that I could go with.
Okay, yeah. I just think it'll, like, I have this wonderful idea in my head, like everything else in my life, and then when it comes to the actual application, I just think it'll be nothing like what's going on in my head.
Well, Rachel, were you unhappy with your last project?
Yeah.
You were. Huh.
Yeah. But that was like mostly tracing and like color
Mhm.
copying, where this is more like freestyle.
I really want to come up with. I wish I wasn't so shot because I know that feeling that you're describing, and I know that it leaves like the wind. If you don't invest too much in that idea that you're going to be disappointed, then I don't think you're going to be disappointed. You know, um, you just have to have a little bit of faith. Because look, it is possible that you're just looking forward to the skill level you're going to have next year or the year after. And I realize you might feel a bit of a struggle getting there. But I personally believe if you put that kind of fear somehow, find some way to just put it aside, that you're going to get more out of this than you think.
Okay. Yeah. I wanted to put another thing that I'm gonna say before I get out of here is like
Okay.
I wanted to put like the street in person is like lined with trees up and down here.
Hmm.
And I wanted to put like ads like kind of faded in the trees, if you think that's
I
And
think that could work. I think if you want to do that, I would take advantage of the extreme perspective so that the stuff near us is far larger than the stuff in the distance. And that will allow a couple of big trees, like a big one on the right and a big one on the left, where I could see the ad.
Okay.
The idea of trying to imagine those ads on the distant trees is a little hard.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
think-
yeah.
I think if the ones near us are convincing, then the mind will let you get away with a lot in terms of implying that it continues down the avenue.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, my pleasure. Thanks for asking, Rachel,
Yeah.
for the time. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Have a good day.
All right, you too. You too. Well, would either of you ladies want to talk about your work or show me something? No pressure. Laura's like, no.
I kind of
No.
want to hear what you had to say because you're. It's very, very useful hearing what comments you have about other people's stuff, and then I come across the comments later on when I'm working on the project. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, one student said he wanted to have an Ira. Just cracked me up.
Ugh.
It'd be about this big. Just sit there, give me advice when I need it. I could turn it off when I've had enough. you know, I have to say, like, I always feel in a rush in New York colleges. I've worked at a few colleges in the city, and the agenda is always a little bit larger than I have to squeeze it to just fit. And that makes me choose proportions that I don't always think are ideal. On the one hand, I want to talk to you guys more about ideas and less about technology, and more about your ideas. Like when before COVID, if I could end a week early, which is a struggle, I would divide the last week by the number of people. The last, so it's 3 hours, 20 people. I divide that up and say, okay, I get 6 minutes a person. And I would literally do it. I'd just go from computer to computer. Just you, me, and your art. And it would be very exact. I taught at a school where the classes were half our size. By the way, they closed. So that business model did not work. But they were half the size. So I was able to do a lot of hands-on, just a lot of like individual one-on-one. Let's talk about this one piece of art. And it was great. But, 21st century cities, we just don't have that ability. So also, I'm so sick of hearing myself. By the time we get to week 12, I just can't stand it. It's just like, somebody stop this man. He talks all the freaking time. He just doesn't stop. So at a given point, I'm like, oh, great, breakout rooms. I set an alarm to make sure that I'm back.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be in your class. Thank you. I'm gonna get tired of your voice.
Thank you. Thank you both for sticking around. I love it. Don't get me wrong. I love it. I really do love it. This is one of my favorite classes. I wish FIT taught it in the next semester, but it's just the fall semester. So I miss it all the way till next September. I teach web design next semester at FIT. I don't know if either of you are taking Intro to Web Design.
Have to take it, but not letting me register for it yet. So
Oh, really? I know. I heard from somebody that there's one open section. It's not mine, but to flatter myself for a minute. But we have really good web design teachers. That I know. One of my bosses teaches web design, and he's good. There's another guy who's been teaching it here for 15, 20 years.
how is this web design structured? Like, is it more about designing or like coding and stuff?
Well, that's a really good question, and I have to modify it by saying I've never been in those classrooms, right? So there's a little bit of guessing, but I know when I was hired, they gave me a list of technology that had to be included. So that means a lot of code, and that means HTML, the main language, and that's a small language and not that hard, but its cousin, CSS. You've heard of this before, cascading style sheets. That gets deeper, but it also makes things more beautiful. So I would say in my class, the 15 weeks go sort of like this. the first day, everybody's punchy because they can't believe they made a web page first day, which you actually do in my class. That drunken joy is sustained for at least another 6, 7, 8 weeks. People get more tools and they're still good at it. Around the middle of the semester, things are getting harder. People are asking more difficult questions, and oh, I need those photos to get smaller because someone might be on a phone instead of a computer. Or I want one of those fancy menus. This is my hated part of the class. I hate this. I wish I could throw it out. But the fancy menus you see on the top of websites.
The navigation bar.
Yeah, the nav bar. Oh, you've really been around this. Yes, the nav bar, it's my most dreaded part of the semester. Because, you know, no matter what I do, only half the class seems to succeed at that. But I have to say, by and large, almost everybody comes out of that class thinking, I had no idea I could actually do that.
It's because I'm a transfer student, and like in my past college, I took like, so it's a long story, but basically I have another associate,
Oh,
and in my past school I was doing when I finished that associate, my past associates is a music business, and when I finished that, I went into the graphic design associates and I studied a year, and I had to take intro to web design, and it was a struggle. I had to learn Dreamweaver, and
oh.
it is complicated.
So wait,
But
I got to ask you a couple quick things. One, do you have a major now? Or I mean, if you
yes, I do.
what is it?
Communication design.
Communication design. So that's the big one, right? Like you do a lots of different kinds of design,
Yeah.
and you're going to stick in communication design.
Yeah, I want to for my bachelor's I want to do graphic design, yes.
Got it. So I want to say some web design stuff to you, knowing that and knowing a little about your history. One is, well, for one, my class doesn't use Dreamweaver. We write the code ourselves. You might actually find it easier. It's not supposed to be. Dreamweaver was made to write code for you. So it sounds very attractive, but it has issues. So I think it's actually easier to learn by hand. So my class is all by hand. Second thing I want to say is I was a cartoonist and switched from cartooning to illustration, then switched from illustration to painting. I have a master's in painting, by the way. Then I moved into graphic design kind of late because I like the software. The software had just come out. So I learned how to use the big packages and started working as a graphic designer. By then, it'd been years of fine art painting, like weird, wild painting. And I didn't expect to come back to commercial art. But that was print. And after working in print as a graphic designer for a while, I got interested in the web because it was the hot thing. So I took a little class in HTML and CSS and started making websites. That was so exciting that I thought, gee, wouldn't it be nice to be able to put movies on those websites and animation? So I started studying movies first, then animation later.
I was really like lately I've been really interested in learning how to work, like I've been work this tool called Webflow.
Yeah, I don't use it.
So because I don't know much about coding, but I wanted to learn a little bit, and I wanted to include my animations in it into my website. So Webflow allows you to do that. So that's why I was interested in it, but I find it really exciting to do all those things.
Well, you know, I guess I do too, but I really want to be fair that my own weird path, which is still changing all the time. You know, after years of graphic design, people took an interest in my fine art recently. And I was supposed to have my first show in April, my first solo show anyway, in April, but COVID interrupted. So now it's going to be next April. So I have no idea what comes next. I really don't. I'm very restless, but part of it is just money, to be blunt. Like if an area seems to have less work, I'm like, oh, what can I learn to make myself more useful and gain other incomes? So a lot of these things happen that way. You know, I saw the web was on the rise, and I had a good teacher, so I was able to do simple websites when that was good. You know, it was early in the web. But then I realized, oh wow, people are starting to watch movies, and I want to make movies. So if I learn how to do it, I can make commercials for my own websites, take that money and use it for my own art. So a lot of my path had to do with strange decisions like that. Some was just desire. Some was just, that looks kind of cool and it pays. I wonder if I could do that. So there's a little bit of like that. So I have to say about web design, it's probably the nerdiest thing on the list of things that I can do. It probably the number one nerdiest thing. And I would lie if I told you I'm in love with it, but I'd also would be lying if I didn't tell you that I do like it a lot. I really do. It's something about making something beautiful that links is very exciting because the brain links. You know, if I say to you, have you ever flown a kite? Right now, you're imagining who you flew it with, or what the kite was like, or where it was, because I linked. And we link out of order. The human mind doesn't link in order, but books are in order, and even record albums, old records are in order, and everything's in order, but the mind isn't. So I love the web for that. The web is more like the way we think. And like you're saying earlier about want to get your animation on, that's pretty easy. It really depends on the output of the animation. Is it a GIF? Is it a video? You know what I mean? Like, what's the output? But to make a little box and put an animation in it on a website isn't that hard.
No, but I wanted to like incorporate it inside the whole website. Like, I don't know how to explain myself really well.
Can I give you a peek at something?
Yeah, sure.
Right here. A minute. So ironworks.com is how FIT heard of me, mostly. And it's web design. And I get a kick out of nerdy things like clicking available and having it come down to the part, or click back up. I like the idea of saying, well, what do I teach? And the person can pick, here's your class, and it'll talk about that, or they could close it up. So this is HTML, CSS, and this stuff here is jQuery, it's called. But I also like the fact that I could show people stuff. And if they go to the creating page, they could watch some of my animation. They could look at a bunch of illustrations, scattered things in a big wall. Or if they know the secret, where would that be? Under teaching, there's the student gallery. And this becomes interesting because it may get closer to the way you're imagining showing off your work. So here's one way. This is from illustration classes of mine elsewhere.
Yeah, all because I want to make a nice portfolio, to be honest.
And I totally understand that. I mean, frankly, the way I treated this was, to be blunt, here and there, I'll sell like a small website. It's a couple $1,000 bucks, but a couple $1,000 bucks. So I'll do that. Or I teach it a lot. So it gives me freedom where, like, if it's too nerdy, I can't stand it. I get a few months off. I'm not doing this I don't consider myself a full-time web designer. I love the name multimedia designer. I just love it. I do, because there's so much freedom in it. And often I'll learn more because the school needs it, and then I'll figure out how I could use it. So this is what I want to say to you specifically. I like that you switched paths. I like the fact that you explored business and you explored music, and you may be getting tired of it, but like, I did the same thing. And at first everybody's like, what's up with this person? He's real creative, but kind of wild and doesn't stay anywhere, doesn't stay put. And, how's it ever going to have a career like that? But then at a given point, it does become a career. And then everyone's like, how do you know all that stuff? And you're like, do you really want to know? I mean, really? I did it because this didn't work out. So I did that. And then, when A didn't work, I did B. Turns out, a little later, someone asked me for A again.
Yeah, I love music. The issue with music, it's a very sexist industry. So it's hard to get into. And also, like, what I wanted to do mostly was to be a tour manager, and that's stopped right now. And the key for that, to succeed in that, is mostly like sticking with an artist and hoping they make it.
It's a rough
So it's a little complicated thing to do. And like it's not the easiest to get a living out of it. It's very rewarding, yes, but
I mean,
not the easiest to make a living out
there's
of.
so little live music in the United States. I mean, you go to Canada and it's like, I was there a long time ago, I'll admit, but there were like bars all over the place with live music. You know, New York City, even without a pandemic, there's like 20 bars without live music for every one that has it. Never mind clubs and other venues, you know, concert halls. And
Yeah, like
about
going to Nashville, like in Nashville, you can see down Broadway, you can see like everything is music related, and it's really like a dream. It's really
I
nice.
love that. But Laura, also about the sexist part of it, I hate to say this because it's so brutal, but like every field is sexist right now. And it's
That's
your
true.
your mother's generation, the grandmother's generation started really changing things, but your generation still is going to change a lot. You know, the new president coming in, his whole
Oh my God,
communication
I'm
team is
sorry.
women. His whole communication team is women. It's all women. He chose an entire female communications team. I'm like, wow, that's about time. And but God, what a journey it was to get here, to be able to do that. Look, and I have to say, at my age, I talk to someone at your age, and I can't help but feel a little parental at the same time as all my artsy advice. You know, my artsy advice is do it all, Laura. You know, like this is graphic design time, that was music time. Down the road, you'll figure out how your empire is going to run. You know, it could be this arts emporium. I mean, since you also know about business, God knows how much media you might become the boss of. So I think for right now, it's good for you to branch out a lot. You know, the conversation started a little with web design. Graphic design used to mean ink, you know, not screen. So if someone said graphic design, it meant they did packaging or magazines or books or newspapers or posters, but not the web, not movies, and not animation. But like now, the crowds are so mixed. You know, you can make a website, the next minute they're asking you, can you make a catalog for us on paper? And you know, you can or you can't. So I kind of feel like one big dose of web design is good. You already got your dose. So you might not look forward to having to do that again. But if you do, I hope you get a teacher who, you know, really pushes it. Because Laura, listen, even if you hated it, it would be great for you to know enough that in your future business, you might have 2, 3 web designers and you'll know what you're talking about. They'll do the heavy lifting, but you'll know, oh, don't tell me you can't put that video like this, because you'll know. You know, or don't tell me that page has to be that slow. You know, you'll know. And I feel for like a lot of our students, to be a little exposed to web design may be dramatic. I'm picking my words carefully. They may be dramatic, but it's good to know what's possible while you're in art school. I went to SVA as a cartoonist. And halfway through, I fell in love with illustration. And then by the end, I fell in love with painting. I spent the next 15 years just painting and starving. Painting, starving, kind of like that. When I got back into commercial art, I never thought the first effort at a cartoonist was going to help. But it's like now it's all over the place. You know, and it's like, I gotta show you something real quickly just because it's funny. Last night, the rain spoke to me slowly, saying what joy to come falling out of the brisk cloud, to be happy again in a new way on the earth. That's what it said as it dropped, smelling of iron, and vanished
like a dream of the ocean into the branches. And the...
You know, when as a web designer, I started getting a lot of work in Flash. I don't know if you guys remember Flash, but everything was moving. It was very splashy way to do web design, and it was great for me. And then it turned out that this old knowledge about cartooning just came out of the drawer. You know, and then I started getting requests for things like, you know, look, we need someone to teach how to make a cartoon talk. And I was like, I'm not sure I'm your guy. I'm a motion graphics guy. But they're like, no, no, no. We'll give you a little window of time. You just get the class ready. It's like now, just making someone blink and dart their eyes around and use my own voice. It's such a head rush that if I do a web design for anyone who's going to welcome it, I'd love to have a character involved. But let me back up. This has been my experience, and I want to share it with the both of you before we all go. There's the specialist, and then there's the generalist. But if the generalist is passionate and persistent, they get as good as the specialist, but in a half a dozen fields. So it's like, for me, I wanted to paint the most. And again, if you go to Instagram at any point and look up Ira Epstein, you'll
We
see.
looked you up when we were in the groups.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
And
It's
it's like,
good. We
put
love
on
your art in my group.
oh, thank you. And you know, that's probably what I would do if I was independently rich right now. You know, if the bills were just magically paid, I think I'd do that. That's my most soulful enterprise. That whole series. But it was great to know that I didn't look. There's nothing wrong with waiting tables for a living. There's nothing wrong with putting books on shelves, and there's nothing wrong with working in a grocery store. But how long can it sustain a creative person? It becomes the question. How long? You know, so for me, it was always about, listen, I gotta find a way to pay bills that's creative. And I didn't go the specialist road because none of those things really scratched the. Look, if painting had had more money in it, I might have stopped there. You know, so maybe it was fate. But since this country just does not spend a lot of money on painting, really, you know, it's almost impossible to make a living doing that. It's so difficult anyway. It led me on this weird journey, and I have no regrets about it now. You know, it stayed very interesting and constantly engaging, and I meet all these cool people all the time, and there's always something else to do. So the fact that you made some changes in the past doesn't worry me at all. I know other teachers it will worry. And they'll say, hey, you know, you could only play the violin. And I'm like, yeah, go tell that to the conductor. I'll bet you the conductor plays 20, 30 instruments, if not every instrument in the orchestra. So there's a lot of room for the passionate generalist. Guys, I'm going to take off because this I'm passionately hungry right now.
Thank you so much for sharing all that information. That's why I stayed.
Thanks, Christina. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, both
Thank
of you.
you.
I'll see you guys next week.
I'll see you next week. Have a great one.
Bye.
Bye, Laura.
Bye.
Bye.